Hello, you wonderful Godot people. In this video, we're going to start showing text to the player. Now, so far we've been looking a lot at how to use variables, how to use arrays, how to combine them all and use a printout, right? So we're going to print things in the output, but that doesn't help us in game. So in this video, we're going to start looking at ways we can display things to the player. Specifically, we need to look at how to import assets into Godot. We don't want that weird blank gray screen that's just the default background. We want to show pretty things. So how do we get pretty things in game? We're going to create a background texture. When I say create a background texture, I've provided you with a texture. We're going to create it in the game. We're going to resize the game's display or look at the options of how to do that. And then we're going to create a label node and update the label with our script. So along with this video, I've provided the download, which I have called, let me take a look at what I've called it. I've already downloaded it right here. Looney Lips GFX. And GFX is just short for graphics. And if I open up the zip file, it's a folder called GFX, that's graphics again. So if I open that, you'll find a blackboard, which is what in England we call a chalkboard. Two different buttons. Well, it's actually one button, one is pressed, one is not pressed, and a font called Felt Pen. I'll provide the links for all of those so you can go look at them. The buttons are from Kenny. We're going to use a lot of his work. He does great Creative Commons work, Creative Commons Zero. It's not actually open source, but you can use it even commercially without crediting him or paying him. I'm going to credit him because he does great work. Okay. So I have here this folder. How do I import it into Godot? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the resource folder, right? The folder where the actual project is. The easiest way to do this is to right click on it and do open in file manager. Okay, so I'm there. Now let's go back to this zip file. So I'm going to minimize you and find the zip file, which for some reason I managed to close down. How do I import this folder? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy it over. I'm going to drag it. You could also right click on it and do copy. You could do Control C, Control V. I'm just going to copy the graphics folder into here and I can close that. All right, so now we have a graphics folder. How do we get Godot to read it? Well, if I open Godot again, I don't have to. It does it for me. Anything that is in the resource folder that can be edited by Godot or edited in Godot will automatically import. If I click the little drop down for the graphics thing, you'll see the stuff is in here. Now later on, when we start dealing with sounds in the future games, specifically Hoppy Days, we're going to have to look at how to switch looping on and off. We want some sounds to loop and some not to. It doesn't really matter with pictures, but the principle is going to be the same. I'm going to click on the asset we're going to change. We're going to go to import, change what needs to happen with it, and click re-import. Awesome. So here we have our graphics. Let's start by making a background. To do that, I'm going to click on Looney Lips, which remember is a control node, and I'm going to add a child. To add a child, I can press this button here, add child node, so this plus button, or I can do Control A, the little shortcut shows up. I almost never press Control A, so I'm going to do it just for fun. I always press the button. I quite like shortcuts. And what kind of node do we want? I mean, we could go through all the controls and look for what we want, but I happen to know this one is going to be a texture. Specifically, a texture rect. Control for drawing textures. Let's create it. And I'm going to rename it. So double click on it and type in background. Just a nice human readable thing. Now at the moment, we've got this node with no information in it. And you can see here this empty texture. I can left click on it, load it, and go find a texture. Or I could just drag Blackboard into the texture. And there it is. And here we have a lovely background. Now, this blue box, that's what's going to be rendered to the player. And you'll see the texture is much bigger. So if I press play, here is my texture. It's really zoomed in. And when I resize the window, I'm not actually resizing the display, right? Or rather, I'm not resizing the blackboard. It almost looks like I've cut a hole into my desktop and I'm widening and shortening the hole, but what's the other size is the same size. So let's look at how we can scale that with a display. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit expand. This texture scales to fit its bounding rectangle. Let's switch that on. Okay. And now when I press play, it's teensy. Now, why didn't it happen here? Well, sometimes Godot doesn't refresh control elements. That's anything with a user interface, any UI element, immediately. An easy way to fix it is to open a new scene and come back to it, and you'll see it. Just refresh the display by going away and coming back. So I'm going to close that scene because we don't actually need it. And I need this to be the right size. I'm going to click this layout button, and I've got all these different options here. And if I click anchors and go to full rectangle, well, what's it doing is saying, okay, I want you to measure these four corners? Well, how do I know? Click on View and go to Show Helpers. And each of these green things shows you the anchor it's going to be. Now, it's important to note that right now the texture is not actually the full screen. So there it is. And it's just measuring where these corners are. Well, that's not that useful. So let's go back to Layout and press Full Rect. Right? Full rectangle, the full display. And now when I press play, this display actually resizes, which is much cooler. One more thing we can do is we could change the default size of this display. If we go to Project and go to Project Settings and scroll down till we find Window, which is under Display, you can see here the width and height. So if you wanted, you could go 1080 by 800, for example. Press Close, and the default's a very different size. When I press play, it actually doesn't fit nicely onto my screen anymore. So I'm going to put mine back, but if you want to change the default size, you can. You could also switch off resizable. What does that look like? Well, it means that the player can no longer drag the corners, which might be what you want. It's not what I want, but that's how you could do it. You could go borderless, and you could go full screen. I'm not going to switch full screen on because it changes how my capture program, in this case OBS, renders recordings. In other words, I won't actually be able to record, so I'm going to leave it alone as the defaults, but that's how you can change those. Okay, so we have this beautiful background, and when I press play, there's a lovely background that just gets in the way, and all the text is still here. So let's put a new node. I'm going to click on Looney Lips, and I'm going to add a new child, and I'm going to type in label, which is spelled like that. Why did I click on Looney Lips first? Because otherwise the label will be a child of the background. Well, the label isn't a child of the background, it's a child of Looney Lips. Where you put your children actually starts becoming quite important as your game gets bigger. And as you can see right now, it's just in this little corner. And I'm going to write the words placeholder text so we can see what's happening. Placeholder. And I don't need that return. And you'll notice a few things. One, this node takes up very little space. Two, the font is wrong. Let's change the font first. I'm going to go down to Custom Font. I'm going to click it. I actually don't need to enable that. The moment I pick a font, it'll do it anyway, but just for the look of the thing, let's click it. So I'm going to click New Dynamic Font. And then when I click on the font, all these extra options come up. First thing you'll notice, by the way, if I zoom in, our text looks like it's vanished. It hasn't vanished. The text is still there, but we've just overridden all the font information. There is no font. So let's drag Felt Pen into font data. And if I want to, I can go to Settings and change the font size. Let's try 40. Let's make this nice and big. If I zoom out a bit, that's looking pretty good. Let's press play. Not bad. Now, at the moment, we're just in the top left. So let's make this a little bit better. I'm going to, again, go to Layout. I'm going to set my anchors to be the full rectangle. So I'm saying when you resize, check all four corners, right? Don't just check the top left corner. If I resize the bottom right, I want everything to resize. Go to Layout, and you know what? Let's do full rect again. However, when I press play, I'm still not happy about how close placeholder text is to the edges. Let's give it a margin. So let's go to Margin. Just click here under Control. And I want to give it, what's good? I think 24 pixels. Yes, 24 pixels to the left. 24 from the top. 24 from the right. I don't mean that, do I? I mean negative 24. And probably negative 24 from the bottom. And what this is going to do is it's going to make the text always be 24 pixels no matter how big it is, unless it can't fit. A few more options we can look at while we're here, just so you know what they are. Align left and V-align top. This is your horizontal alignment. I could put it in the center or in the right, or fill. There's not enough text to fill it, so it doesn't really matter. And V-align works the same way. Center, bottom, fill, top. I'm also going to put auto wrap on. I want the text to automatically wrap around. And just to see what that looks like, if I make this really narrow, boom, look at that. It automatically moves it. We can also change everything to uppercase. That just puts everything in caps. I'm not going to do that. It's weird. All right. So this looks good. How can I actually change what's written here? How do I know how to change it in script? Let's go into our script. And you know what? I don't need that bit. Instead, I'm going to get node. Get node is a function within GDScript. So if I hold Control and click on it, it'll open the documentation. And this is part of a normal node, so every single node, everything can use this, which is useful because everything inherits from a node. And all I'm going to do is get node and then as a string, the path to the node. What does that mean? It means I can click in here and just type the path, or I can use the drop-down label. There's a couple of things we can do to make this easier, and I'll show you those in a second. First, let me not get myself too distracted, and I want to know, how do I change this text? Well, I need to know the property. And to do that, I'm going to mouse over the word text. I'm not going to touch anything, and it says property text. What that means is, when I go back into my script, if I do dot, and then the name of the property, which here is text, equals, this is some text. All right. Let's go back to 2D mode and just remind ourselves. Right now this says placeholder text. When I press play, it's been updated by the script. I don't know why I hesitated on the word script, I just did. So we now know how to change this in code. Couple of things you can do instead of doing get node label. The first is if I don't want to type it, or if I'm not sure of the spelling, or I don't know the path, I can drag it into the script, which is awesome. The other thing I can do is I can use a shortcut, an alias. I can use $ and then the name of the node. If I'm doing it this way, I don't need to use strings. I can use strings, it doesn't really make a difference, but I don't need to. The only reason I would want to use strings is if for some reason there was a space in the node name. There shouldn't ever be a space in the node name because that's against the convention. And I'm not going to put these strings here because I don't need to. I will point out that because we're using the default name label, it's in this, what color is that? This sort of light blue. I think label is actually not a very useful name, so I'm going to change this to display text. What are we displaying to the player? Well, now label is wrong, so let's use our nice $ shortcut. Display text is right there. So it doesn't matter what type of node it is. It knows that this is a label node, and it knows that label nodes have a text property. So when I press play, this is some text. Awesome. Another thing you could do if you want extra credit is you could use, instead of a display text, we could change this to a different node. I could do change type, and there is another label called a rich text label. We're not going to be using this because it's just extra complexity that we don't really need, but just to show you the difference, if I open this, it behaves very much like a label, but it also has BB code. I can enable BB code and type BB code in here. And the property, instead of changing text, which is here, would be BB code text. You'll also notice all my fonts have reset. That's because we now have access to bold, italics, and so on. If I wanted to change the color or change certain words into bold or underline them, so the words the player gives me would be, for instance, bold and red, I would set up a BB code thing. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to right-click on it and change the node back to label and just check my font is still good. It's not. So let's go to new dynamic font, load it in, and drag it. Kaboom. Awesome. And placeholder text has gone, so I'm just going to write placeholder text. And let's change my settings to be 40 again. Great. You'll also notice there's a bunch of other options we can play with. We could give it an outline color. I'm not going to because it's a black background with white text. Giving an outline is just going to make it fuzzy. Extra spacing, don't really care about that, but there's all these different options. And I encourage you to explore, play with it, really get to know what all these things do. Okay. So far, so solid. But what's happening is I'm pressing play. I'm very nicely changing the text up here, but everything that I need is down here. So this is my challenge to you. I'd like you to make better use of the label node. Try displaying the story and the prompts together in this new display text, this new label that we've just created. So pause the video, give that a shot, and when you come back, I'll show you my solution. And welcome back. This is actually a lot simpler than it might sound. So if I go into the script, we've already solved this problem. In fact, I can get rid of print entirely because I'm setting the text property to be a string. And here we have a string that is plugging in strings from an array. So all I need to do is go story, which is spelled like that, percentage prompts. And in fact, I can just get rid of this entirely. I'm going to press Control K. It's going to comment out the line and press play. Once upon a time, someone called Jan. I didn't. Ooh, what did I do wrong? I know what I did wrong. When I changed the type, it reset all of these. So let's just do auto wrap and try that one more time. We'll pretend that was good. Once upon a time, look at this. Someone called Jan ate a banana flavored sandwich, which made him feel all tingly inside. It was a glorious day. Look at that. One more thing I'll point out in this script is when I'm changing the property here, I'm changing the property of a child node, right? Loony Lips lives up here and the display text is down here. So we've actually just learned how to change the properties of a different node, which is really good. It's a fundamental skill that we're going to be using a lot. And that brings us to the end of the video. In this video, we've learned some really cool fundamental things. How to create a background texture, how to import that texture into Godot, how to change a node type, and then how to change it back because I didn't want it changed anyway. We've looked at how to resize the game's display, how to display text using a label node, and how to change the properties of a child node. Really strong foundational stuff we're going to use again and again and again. So a really great start, and now all I have to say is great stuff, and I will see you in the next video.